I'm Samantha Collins, 28, and the day that should have been the happiest of my life turned into the beginning of a nightmare. Standing in my wedding gown, surrounded by guests at the reception, my mother clinked her glass for a toast. With that picture-perfect smile she always used to hide her true intentions, Mom announced. The car Jake's parents gave you, we're passing it on to Amber since she needs it more than you do. My new husband's face went pale. What Mom didn't know was that car held secrets that would unravel our entire family's web of lies. Before I continue this wild story about how my mother's actions at my wedding exposed years of family secrets, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and if you've ever experienced family drama at a wedding, hit that like button. This story has more twists than a mountain road, so subscribe to catch all the family drama that's coming your way. To understand why my mother's announcement at my wedding was so devastating, you need to know about my family. I grew up in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut with my parents Eleanor and Richard Collins, and my younger sister Amber, who's 22 now. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Beautiful colonial house, summer vacations to Martha's Vineyard, matching outfits for family photos. But behind closed doors, there was always an unspoken hierarchy. My mother Eleanor is what many would call a helicopter parent, but that term doesn't capture her controlling nature. She micromanaged every aspect of our lives, from what we wore to who we befriended. She was obsessed with appearances and status, joining every community committee and hosting elaborate dinner parties. Her smile never reached her eyes, something I noticed from an early age but couldn't articulate until much later. My father Richard was her polar opposite. A successful accountant who preferred staying in the background, he avoided conflicts at all costs. Whenever my mother went too far, he'd disappear into his study rather than stand up to her. "Your mother knows best," he'd say with a tired smile. I now realize he was as much a victim of her manipulation as we were. Then there was Amber, the golden child. While I had to work part-time jobs through high school, Amber received expensive dance lessons, designer clothes, and a brand new car for her 16th birthday. When I got accepted to Yale, my parents suddenly claimed they couldn't afford the tuition. I ended up at the state university, working 2 jobs to pay my way. Meanwhile, Amber attended an exclusive private college, all expenses paid. When I questioned the disparity, my mother would say, "Amber just needs more support than you do. You've always been so independent, Samantha." I met Jake Henderson at the marketing firm where I landed a job after graduation. He was 30, creative director, kind, funny, and from a wealthy family that had built a successful chain of luxury hotels. Unlike my own family, the Hendersons were warm and genuine. Mrs. Henderson, Patricia, took me under her wing immediately, often inviting me to family dinners where I felt more welcome than in my own home. Mr. Henderson, William, was equally welcoming, treating me like the daughter he never had. When Jake proposed after 2 years of dating, his parents were ecstatic. As an engagement gift, they gave us a brand new Mercedes SUV, saying they wanted us to be safe when we started a family. I was overwhelmed by their generosity. It was the first time in my life I'd received something nicer than my sister, and I couldn't help feeling a spark of pride. My mother's reaction was immediate but subtle. "Isn't that a bit flashy for someone just starting out?" she commented when she saw the car. "People might get the wrong impression." Over the following weeks, her resentment grew more obvious. She'd make comments about old money showing off and people who buy affection. When Jake wasn't around, she'd suggest I was marrying him for his family's money. As our wedding approached, Amber's life was falling apart, in contrast to my happiness. She dropped out of her master's program after breaking up with her boyfriend, moved back home, and was unemployed. My mother constantly reminded me how Amber needed support during this difficult time, often suggesting we postpone wedding plans to avoid upsetting her. Jake's parents noticed my mother's strange behavior during pre-wedding events. At our engagement party, Eleanor barely acknowledged Patricia's speech, but gave a tearful toast about how Amber had always dreamed of being the first to marry. When the Hendersons offered to contribute significantly to the wedding, my mother initially refused, only relenting when she realized she could plan a more lavish event with their money. What I didn't know then was that my parents' finances weren't what they seemed. Despite appearances, they had been living well beyond their means for years. My father later admitted he had been aware of some financial irregularities, but had been too afraid to confront my mother about them. The elaborate lifestyle, Amber's expensive education, the country club membership, much of it was built on hidden debt and, as I would later discover, money that should have been mine. Our wedding was exactly as my mother wanted it. 300 guests at an exclusive country club, custom gown, 6-tier cake, and a string quartet. The Hendersons graciously covered most expenses, though my mother took credit for every detail. During the ceremony, I was too happy to notice the calculating look in her eyes as she watched Jake's parents beaming at us. Now I realized she was already formulating her plan. The night before our wedding, Jake told me something that seemed odd at the time. "I have copies of all the documentation for the car locked in my office safe," he said, just as a precaution. When I asked why, he hesitated before saying, "I just don't entirely trust your mother's reaction to our gift. Better safe than sorry." I laughed it off, thinking he was being paranoid. I had no idea how right he would be. Our wedding ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. The historic stone church was decorated with white roses and baby's breath, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows as Jake and I exchanged vows. His eyes were misty as he promised to love and protect me forever, a promise he would keep in ways neither of us could imagine at the time. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the joy I felt was pure and complete. For that brief, shining moment, everything was perfect. The reception began at 5 in the nearby country club ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above round tables draped in ivory linens, centerpieces of pale pink peonies and silver candelabras, creating a romantic atmosphere. The Hendersons had spared no expense, wanting our day to be magical. William Henderson gave a heartfelt toast about welcoming me to their family, saying they already loved me like a daughter. Patricia dabbed tears away as she raised her glass. I noticed my mother's behavior becoming increasingly strange as the evening progressed. She kept disappearing for brief periods, returning with a slightly more pronounced smile each time. She was drinking more champagne than usual, her laughter becoming louder, her gestures more dramatic. My father seemed tense, constantly checking his phone and avoiding eye contact with the Hendersons. Dinner had just been served when my mother abruptly stood up, clinking her knife against her champagne flute. The room gradually fell silent as heads turned toward our table. This wasn't on the program. Speeches were scheduled for later. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, sensing my unease. "I'd like to make an announcement," Eleanor said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. She wore that familiar smile, the one that never reached her eyes but appeared perfect in photographs. "First, to my beautiful daughter Samantha and her handsome husband Jake, may your lives together be blessed." Polite applause rippled through the room. I felt a momentary relief, thinking perhaps she was just being spontaneous in her well wishes. "And since today is about family coming together," she continued, her gaze shifting to where my sister sat, "I wanted to share some wonderful news. The car that Jake's parents so generously gave you, we're passing it on to Amber since she needs it more than you do." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water, my lungs unable to draw breath. Jake's hand tightened around mine as he straightened in his chair. "You see," my mother continued, oblivious, or perhaps enjoying, the tension she'd created, "Amber has a job interview next week. It's quite far away, and she'll need reliable transportation. Since you two have each other, and Jake's family resources, it only makes sense to help your sister get back on her feet." Across the room, I saw Patricia Henderson's smile freeze, then dissolve into disbelief. William was already halfway out of his chair, his napkin thrown onto the table. Jake found his voice before I could. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, but that car was a gift to us. The title is in our names. You can't just take it." My mother's smile hardened. "Family shares, Jake. That's how we raised our girls. Isn't that right, Richard?" My father, looking like he wanted to disappear into his chair, gave a weak nod. We should discuss this later, Eleanor. This isn't the time or place. From the table where my sister sat with cousins, Amber called out, I already moved my stuff into it. The key works great, by the way. She dangled a key ring in the air, her expression triumphant. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Jake's parents had reached our table by then, Patricia's hand protective on my shoulder. Eleanor, William Henderson said, his voice low but firm, that vehicle is a gift from us to Samantha and Jake. It's registered in their names. What you're suggesting is, frankly, theft. My mother's laugh was brittle. Oh, William, don't be so dramatic. It's just a family matter. You wouldn't understand how we do things. I understand perfectly well, Patricia interjected, her normally gentle voice steely. And I think you're ruining your daughter's wedding day. Amber had sauntered over to our table by then. It's just a car, Sam. Don't be so selfish. You know I need it more than you do. Tears burned in my eyes as humiliation washed over me. Guests were openly staring now, some whispering behind their hands, others looking away in embarrassment. The wedding planner hovered uncertainly at the edge of the confrontation, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Jake stood, pulling me gently to my feet. We're leaving, he announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. To those who came to genuinely celebrate with us, thank you. The party will continue, but Samantha and I need some time. As he guided me toward the exit, my mother called after us. Don't be ridiculous. You can't leave your own wedding. Without turning back, Jake replied, watch us. In the bridal suite where I'd gotten ready that morning, I collapsed into tears. I'm so sorry, I sobbed as Jake held me. I knew she could be difficult, but I never imagined she'd do something like this. This isn't your fault, Jake assured me, his voice gentle but anger simmering underneath. But there's something you should know. I had a feeling your mother might try something. That's why I installed a GPS tracker in the car last week. And I have all the documentation locked in my office safe, including the title with our names on it. I looked up at him in surprise. You suspected this? He hesitated. Not this exactly, but something. The way she reacted when we got the car, some comments she made. My parents noticed too. William suggested the tracker as a precaution. As we sat there, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from wedding guests wondering what happened. Jake's phone rang. It was his father. Yes, we're okay, Jake said into the phone. No, don't make a scene. Yes, we're going to deal with it, but not tonight. We'll probably still take our flight tomorrow. I know, Dad, thanks. When he hung up, he explained that his parents were running interference, telling guests we'd had a minor family disagreement, but the reception should continue. Meanwhile, several of our friends had texted that they were leaving in solidarity. What do you want to do? Jake asked me. We could stay at a hotel tonight or go to my parents' house. The thought of facing anyone else that night was unbearable. Hotel, I whispered. I just want to be with you. As we slipped out a side entrance to avoid further confrontation, I caught a glimpse of my father standing alone on the terrace, looking lost. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Shame. He raised a hand as if to wave, then let it fall as he turned away. That night, in an anonymous hotel room, still wearing my wedding dress because we had no other clothes, I realized my mother had done more than try to steal our car. She had stolen what should have been the happiest day of my life, and unwittingly set in motion events that would expose decades of family secrets. We decided to continue with our honeymoon plans despite the disaster at our wedding. The next morning, we went home long enough to change clothes and collect our passports, carefully avoiding any family members who might be there. Our luggage had already been packed for the trip, 2 weeks at a private villa in Santorini, Greece, another generous gift from the Hendersons. The Mediterranean sunshine and blue-domed buildings of Santorini should have been the perfect backdrop for romance, but the shadow of what happened loomed over us. I tried to focus on the beauty around us, the crystal-clear waters, the stunning sunsets, the delicious food, but my phone kept buzzing with messages from my mother. You're being childish, Samantha. Amber already loves the car. Your father says you're overreacting. We need the key to the glove compartment. This is what family does for each other. After the 10th message, Jake gently took my phone and turned it off. Let's just be present with each other, he suggested. Whatever's happening back home can wait. For a few days, I managed to push the wedding incident to the back of my mind. We explored the island, swam in our private pool, and made love under the stars. But on the fourth night, Jake's phone rang during dinner at a small taverna overlooking the caldera. It's my father, he said, looking concerned. I should take this. I watched Jake's expression darken as he listened to whatever William was saying. He asked a few short questions, then promised to call back later. What's wrong? I asked when he returned to the table. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Remember the GPS tracker I installed in the car? When I nodded, he continued. It shows the car was moved from our driveway while we've been gone. It's at your parents' house now. A chill ran through me despite the warm evening. They took it? How? We have the keys. They must have had a copy made from when Amber borrowed it before the wedding, Jake said grimly. But there's more. My father started asking questions about your mother after what happened. He has some friends in banking, and he's found some concerning information. Back at our villa, Jake opened his laptop and pulled up the tracking app. Sure enough, there was our Mercedes, represented by a blue dot, clearly parked at my parents' suburban home. I can't believe they'd just take it, I whispered. That's theft. It is, Jake agreed. And my father thinks it might not be the first time your mother has taken something that doesn't belong to her. Over the next few days, information trickled in through calls and emails from the Hendersons. William had hired a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. The initial findings were disturbing enough that Jake and I decided to cut our honeymoon short. The night before we left Greece, we received a call from an unexpected source. My father's sister, Aunt Carolyn, whom I hadn't seen in years. Samantha, she said when I answered Jake's phone, I heard about what happened at your wedding. I'm so sorry, honey, but I'm not surprised. Eleanor has always been. Well, there's no nice way to say this. She's been taking advantage of people for years. According to Aunt Carolyn, my mother had systematically alienated her from our family after she questioned some loans that were never repaid. She also revealed something that made my blood run cold. My grandparents had set up a college fund for me when I was born, with enough money to cover an Ivy League education. I was the executor of their estate, Carolyn explained. The money was supposed to go directly to Yale when you enrolled. When Eleanor told me you'd decided on State University instead, I thought it was strange. I asked to speak with you directly, but she wouldn't allow it. Eventually, she produced a document with your signature transferring the funds to a family account. I had my doubts, but legally, there wasn't much I could do. I felt physically sick. I never signed anything like that. I really wanted to go to Yale. They told me we couldn't afford it. Silence hung on the line for a moment. I was afraid of that, Carolyn finally said. Samantha, I think your mother may have forged your signature, and I don't think that's all she's done. By the time we boarded our flight back to the States, we had a growing list of financial discrepancies to investigate. Jake had also received an email from an old family friend of the Collins family who had seen a social media post about our wedding drama. Your mother-in-law has a pattern, the email read. She borrows money she never repays, takes credit for others' work, and manipulates situations to her advantage. Many of us have distanced ourselves over the years. If you need documentation of past incidents, I have kept records. The final blow came during our layover in London. Jake was checking the tracking app when he noticed the car was on the move. They're driving to a dealership, he said, showing me the map. I think they're trying to sell our car. That was when something in me snapped. The lifetime of manipulation, the favoritism, the lies. It all crystallized into a cold, clear resolve. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about standing up to decades of abuse. When we land, I told Jake, my voice steadier than I'd expected, we're going to confront them, all of them. And we're bringing evidence. Jake nodded, taking my hand. Whatever you need to do, I'm with you. But first, we're going to need legal backup. During the remainder of our flight, we formulated a plan. The moment we landed, we would meet with Jake's family lawyer, gather all our documentation, and then face my family with the truth. Not just about the car, but about everything we'd discovered. As our plane descended toward home, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The honeymoon was over in more ways than one. It was time to confront the web of lies my mother had spun around our family for as long as I could remember. We landed on a Wednesday afternoon, exhausted from the shortened honeymoon and long flight, but fueled by determination. Jake's parents met us at the airport, hugging me tightly, as if trying to transfer their strength. Patricia had tears in her eyes. "We're so sorry, sweetie," she said. "We've learned more while you were away. It's worse than we thought." William handed Jake a thick folder. "The investigators' preliminary findings. Review it before you go anywhere near your parents' house." We went straight to the Hendersons' home, where Jake and I showered and changed while William contacted their family attorney. By early evening, we had reviewed the investigators' report and developed a strategy with the lawyer, a stern woman named Miss Thornton, who specialized in financial fraud. "Based on what I'm seeing," Miss Thornton said, pointing to highlighted sections of the report, "there's evidence of identity theft, forgery, and potentially fraud. The college fund alone constitutes a significant theft. But we need to tread carefully. Family cases can get messy, and emotions run high." The GPS tracker showed our car was back at my parents' house. According to the dealership records William had somehow obtained, my mother and sister had attempted to sell the car but were turned away when the dealership verified the registration and found it wasn't in their names. "Let's go," I said, standing up. "I want to get our car and get answers." The drive to my childhood home felt surreal. The familiar streets and houses seemed unchanged, yet everything was different. As we pulled into the driveway behind our Mercedes, I noticed the house looked oddly dark, except for a light in the living room. Jake squeezed my hand. "Remember, stay calm. We have facts on our side." When we rang the doorbell, no one answered at first. Then we heard shuffling inside, and my father opened the door, his face ashen when he saw us. "Samantha," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're back early." "Where's Mom?" I asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "And Amber? We need to talk." "Living room," he mumbled, leading the way. My mother and sister were sitting on the sofa, looking like they'd been in mid-argument when we arrived. The atmosphere was tense, with Amber red-faced, and my mother's usually perfect composure showing cracks. "Well," Eleanor said, recovering quickly and adopting her social smile. "The honeymooners return. Did you forget something?" "Yes," Jake replied coldly. "Our car." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that. Well, as I explained at the wedding, Amber needs it more than you do. It's a simple family redistribution." I stepped forward, placing the folder of evidence on the coffee table. "We need to talk about more than just the car, Mom. We need to talk about Yale, and Grandma's inheritance, and the credit cards opened in my name during college." The color drained from my mother's face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Richard, what is she talking about?" My father, who had been hovering in the doorway, looked away. "I think you should listen to her, Eleanor. We've been doing some research," Jake continued, opening the folder. "With help from Aunt Carolyn, your old friend Martha Lewis, and a private investigator." "You had no right," my mother snapped, her facade cracking. "Digging into private family matters. What happens in this family stays in this family." "Like how you forged my signature to steal my college fund?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "Or how you've been opening credit cards in my name since I was 18. Is that what stays in the family, Mom?" Amber looked confused. "What are you talking about? Mom wouldn't do that." I turned to my sister. "Amber, she's been lying to all of us, Dad included. The reason I couldn't go to Yale wasn't because we couldn't afford it. It was because Mom stole the money Grandma and Grandpa left specifically for my education." "That's absurd," my mother scoffed, but her eyes darted nervously to the papers Jake was arranging on the table. "I used that money for both of you girls, as was my right as your mother." "No," I said firmly. "You used it for yourself. Designer clothes, jewelry, your country club membership." The investigator traced the withdrawals. Jake placed a bank statement in front of my mother. This shows the fund being emptied 2 weeks after Samantha's 18th birthday. The signature on the transfer form doesn't match her other signatures from that time period. My father had edged closer, peering at the documents with growing horror. Eleanor, tell me you didn't do this. Instead of answering him, she turned to me, eyes blazing. So what if I did? I sacrificed everything for this family. I deserve something for myself. The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. Amber's mouth fell open. My father sank into a chair, head in his hands. And the credit cards? I pressed, pulling out more documents. 6 accounts opened in my name while I was in college. Nearly $50,000 in debt that I knew nothing about until now. You were benefiting from those purchases, my mother snapped. Who do you think paid for your apartment furnishings? Your spring break trip? My apartment had second-hand furniture I bought myself, I countered. And I never went on spring break because I was working 2 jobs to pay for the education you told me we couldn't afford. My father looked up, his face contorted with a mixture of shame and anger. Eleanor, you told me those credit cards were joint accounts we opened for emergencies. Oh, shut up, Richard, my mother spat. You never questioned anything as long as your dinner was on the table and your shirts were pressed. Because I trusted you, he shouted, startling all of us. I had never heard my father raise his voice before. I trusted you with our finances, with our children, with everything. And you've been lying to all of us. Amber had been strangely quiet, staring at the documents on the table. What about me? She finally asked in a small voice. Did you steal from me too? A calculating look crossed my mother's face. Of course not, sweetheart. Everything I did was to give you advantages. Samantha was always so independent, but you needed extra support. Don't you dare try to turn this around, I said, anger building. Don't you dare use Amber as your shield again. You didn't prioritize her because she needed more. You used her as an extension of yourself. The dance lessons, the designer clothes, the expensive college. It was all so you could brag about your perfect daughter. That's not true, my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Amber stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. All this time, you made me believe Sam didn't need anything because she was stronger, more capable. But you were just using me to justify taking from her. Amber, sweetie, don't be dramatic, Eleanor cajoled. Everything I did was for this family. The car keys, Jake interrupted, holding out his hand. We're taking our car back now. My mother's eyes narrowed. It's not here. Don't lie, I said wearily. We can see it in the driveway. We also have a GPS tracker on it, so we know exactly where it's been, including your failed attempt to sell it yesterday. Eleanor lunged for her purse on the side table, presumably reaching for the keys, but my father was quicker. He grabbed the purse first, opened it, and extracted the keyring. Enough, Eleanor, he said, handing the keys to Jake. Enough lies, enough stealing, enough manipulation. My mother's face contorted with rage. She snatched a decorative crystal bowl from the coffee table and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered spectacularly. This is how you repay me? After everything I've done for this family? You're all ungrateful. You're nothing without me. Nothing. She grabbed for the folder of evidence, but Jake pulled it away just in time. Undeterred, she began ripping at the papers that were still on the table, shredding bank statements and photocopied signatures. It doesn't matter, Jake said calmly, taking out his phone. We have digital copies of everything, and I'm recording this entire conversation for legal purposes. At that moment, a neighbor knocked on the door, likely concerned about the noise. My father went to answer it, and I heard him quietly explaining that everything was under control. When he returned, he looked different, straighter, more resolute. I want you out of this house, Eleanor, he said with unexpected firmness. Tonight. Pack a bag and go to your sister's, or a hotel. I don't care. But I want you gone. You can't throw me out of my own house, my mother shrieked. Actually, he can, Jake interjected. The house is solely in his name. We checked. My mother turned to Amber, clearly expecting her ally to speak up, but my sister stepped back, moving to stand beside me for the first time I could remember. I think you should go, Mom, Amber said softly. I need. We all need time to process this. The look of betrayal on my mother's face would have broken my heart a week earlier. Now it just confirmed what I was beginning to understand. Her love had always been conditional, transactional, and ultimately self-serving. Fine, she hissed, grabbing her purse back from my father. But this isn't over. Family doesn't abandon family. You'll come crawling back when you realize you need me. As she stormed upstairs to pack a bag, my father collapsed onto the sofa, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. I had no idea, he whispered. I suspected some financial irregularities, but nothing like this. Samantha, I am so sorry. I failed you as a father. I sat beside him, taking his hand. You were manipulated too, Dad. But now we all have a choice about what happens next. Amber sat on his other side, tears still flowing. What do we do now? Jake, who had been checking our car for damage, returned with a grim expression. Now we need to decide whether to press charges. What your mother has done isn't just morally wrong. Much of it is criminal. The weight of that statement hung in the air as we heard my mother's angry footsteps descending the stairs, suitcase in hand. She paused in the doorway, looking at the three of us sitting together on the sofa. Remember this moment, she said coldly, when you turned against your own mother, when you threw away everything I built for this family. Without waiting for a response, she walked out, slamming the door behind her. In the silence that followed, I felt something shift inside me, a lifetime of self-doubt giving way to clarity. My mother had never been the person she pretended to be, and now, surrounded by my husband, my father, and even my sister, I realized that families should be built on love and truth, not manipulation and lies. I think you guys should stick around for a bit, I suggested to everyone in the living room. We've got a lot to talk about. I looked at the car keys now safely back in Jake's hand. And if you don't mind, Jake, I'd like to tell everyone about how I'm seeing the world with different eyes since our wedding day. There's something powerful about finally seeing the truth when you've been manipulated for so long. The weeks following our confrontation were a blur of legal consultations, financial discoveries, and emotional reckonings. Jake and I postponed moving into our new home to stay with his parents while we sorted through the mess my mother had created. My father and Amber remained at the family house, both struggling to come to terms with Eleanor's betrayal in their own ways. Our first step was consulting with Miss Thornton, the attorney who had helped us prepare for the confrontation. In her downtown office, surrounded by leather-bound law books and modern art, she laid out our options. The identity theft and forgery are clear criminal offenses, she explained, pointing to the credit card statements in my name. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these. You could press charges, which would likely result in criminal prosecution. The thought made me physically ill, despite everything. She's still my mother, I said quietly. Miss Thornton nodded sympathetically. There are other approaches. We could pursue civil action to recover the stolen funds without criminal charges. Or, we could use the threat of prosecution to negotiate restitution. Jake squeezed my hand. What do you want to do, Sam? I closed my eyes, trying to separate decades of emotional manipulation from clear thinking. I want what was taken from me, returned, if possible. I want to make sure she can't hurt anyone else this way, but I don't necessarily want her in prison. As we left the lawyer's office, my phone rang. It was Aunt Carolyn, calling to check on us. How are you holding up, sweetheart? She asked when I answered. Taking it day by day, I replied honestly. We're meeting with lawyers, trying to understand the full scope of what happened. I've been doing some digging of my own, she said. I found some documents from your grandparents' estate that might help. And I've been in touch with some of Eleanor's old friends. Turns out I'm not the only one she borrowed money from and never repaid. Over the next few days, a disturbing pattern emerged. My mother had been running various financial schemes for decades, borrowing money she never intended to repay, manipulating accounts, and living far beyond our actual means. What shocked me most was learning that my father's accounting firm had nearly fired him 3 years earlier when they discovered irregularities in accounts he managed. Irregularities that turned out to be my mother's doing when She used his office computer without his knowledge. She almost cost me my career, my father admitted when I asked him about it. We were sitting in a coffee shop near his office, the neutral location making it easier for him to open up. The partners only kept me on because I agreed to therapy and financial monitoring. They thought I had a gambling problem. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He stared into his coffee cup. Shame, mostly. And your mother convinced me it would only upset you unnecessarily. Family protects family, she always said. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I've filed for separation, Samantha. After 30 years, I just can't. I can't trust her anymore. Meanwhile, Jake's parents had hired a forensic accountant who specialized in fraud cases. The findings were shocking, even to those of us who thought we understood the scope of Eleanor's deception. She has accounts in the Cayman Islands. William Henderson informed us during a family meeting at their home. 3 separate accounts that we've identified so far, containing approximately $850,000. My jaw dropped. Where did that kind of money come from? Multiple sources, the forensic accountant explained, flipping through his report. Some appears to be from your grandparents' estate, some from various loans she secured from friends and business associates, some from second mortgages on your family home that your father was unaware of, and a significant amount from credit fraud using your identity, your sister's, and even your father's. The most painful revelation came when we discovered my mother had been systematically selling off family heirlooms and replacing them with convincing fakes. My grandmother's diamond earrings, which Eleanor had gifted me for my college graduation, turned out to be cubic zirconia. The original diamonds had been sold years ago. Similarly, my grandfather's rare coin collection, supposedly being kept safe in a bank vault, had been sold piece by piece to collectors. She was planning to leave, my father realized as the evidence mounted. All these secret accounts, liquidating assets, she was creating an escape fund. The forensic accountant nodded grimly. Based on the account activity, it appears she was planning to leave within the next 6 months, once your daughter Amber was more settled. Amber, who had joined us for these sessions at my insistence, looked devastated. She was using me, she whispered. All the extra attention, the gifts, the support. It was just to keep me dependent on her so no one would suspect what she was doing. As painful as these revelations were, they helped Amber and me begin to heal our relationship. For the first time, we could see how our mother had deliberately driven a wedge between us, using Amber as the golden child while making me the independent one who supposedly needed less support. In reality, she had been playing us against each other our entire lives. One afternoon, Amber asked to meet me alone at a park we'd played in as children. We sat on swings, gently rocking back and forth as we talked. I don't know who I am anymore, she confessed, staring at the ground. Everything I thought about myself, about our family, was a lie. The perfect daughter. The special one. It was all just Mom's manipulation. I reached over and took her hand. You're still you, Amber. Mom's lies don't define you. But who is that? She asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. I dropped out of grad school because it got too hard, and I expected Mom to fix it like she always did. I've never solved my own problems, Sam. I don't know how. You can learn, I told her. We both can. We can learn how to be sisters without Mom's influence coming between us. The legal aspects of the situation continued to unfold. My mother had hired an expensive lawyer who tried to frame the whole situation as a family misunderstanding. When that didn't work, she attempted to paint me as an ungrateful daughter trying to extort money from my parents. The turning point came when my father provided key evidence of financial abuse that had occurred throughout their marriage. Bank records, forged signatures, unauthorized account access. The documentation was damning. I kept records, he admitted. I told myself it was to protect our finances, but deep down, I think I always knew something was deeply wrong. I just didn't have the courage to face it. As the legal pressure mounted, my mother became increasingly desperate. Through her lawyer, she offered a plea deal. She would return the money taken from my identity theft if we dropped all other claims. It's not enough, Miss Thornton advised. That's maybe 15% of what she's taken over the years. We should push for full restitution. The case was building toward a trial when Amber made a surprising decision. I want to testify against Mom, she announced during a family meeting. I know things. Conversations I overheard, documents she had me sign, times she used my identity. I want to help make this right. My mother's response was swift and vicious. She left a voicemail on Amber's phone that we all listened to in horrified silence. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Siding with your sister against your own mother? You are dead to me, Amber. Dead. Don't expect another penny from me, ever. You'll regret this betrayal for the rest of your pathetic, ungrateful life. Hearing those words, so nakedly manipulative and cruel, was the final confirmation we needed. This wasn't about family or love. It was about control and money, and always had been. As the legal proceedings advanced, we made another shocking discovery. During a routine inventory of the house ordered by the court, the appraiser found a hidden safe in the master bedroom closet. Inside were documents showing my mother had been planning to divorce my father once Amber finished college. She had the papers drawn up 3 years ago, my father said, his voice hollow as he showed us the documents. She was just waiting for the right time. Probably after she'd moved enough money offshore. The discovery of the divorce papers pushed my father to take a more aggressive stance in the legal proceedings. He filed for divorce himself, citing fraud and emotional abuse, and became a key witness in the case against my mother. Throughout this difficult time, Jake and his family remained our rock. William and Patricia Henderson opened their home to us, offering both emotional and practical support. They even helped Richard find a good therapist who specialized in helping victims of narcissistic abuse. Family isn't just blood. Patricia told me one evening as we sat on their back porch watching the sunset. It's who stands by you when things get tough. It's who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. It's love without conditions. As I listened to her words, I realized that despite all the pain and upheaval, I had found something precious, a true understanding of what family should be. Not the facade my mother had constructed, but something real, built on honesty, mutual support, and genuine love. The legal case continued to build, with new victims of my mother's schemes coming forward regularly. Each revelation was another piece in a puzzle that had shaped my entire life without my knowledge. But with each discovery, I also felt a strange sense of liberation, as if by naming the truth, I was finally freeing myself from its power. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with dark wood paneling and uncomfortable benches that seemed designed to make everyone as uneasy as possible. Jake sat beside me, his hand steady in mine as we watched my mother enter with her attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who exuded confidence. Eleanor Collins looked nothing like the polished, perfect mother I'd grown up with. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a conservative navy suit that seemed deliberately chosen to project respectability. Her hair, usually impeccably styled, was pulled back in a simple bun. She didn't look at me as she took her seat at the defense table. This was just the initial hearing to determine whether there was enough evidence to proceed with a trial, but it felt momentous nonetheless. After months of investigation, documentation, and legal wrangling, we were finally in a courtroom. The district attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Chen, had taken a special interest in our case. Financial abuse within families is often overlooked, she'd explained during our preparation meeting, but it's a form of domestic violence that can have devastating long-term consequences. Your mother's actions were systematic and predatory. As the hearing began, D.A. Chen outlined the charges. Multiple counts of identity theft, forgery, fraud, and financial exploitation. She presented evidence methodically. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers, credit applications with forged signatures, tax documents with deliberate misrepresentations. Your Honor, she concluded, the state has provided clear evidence that Eleanor Collins engaged in a deliberate, long-term pattern of financial exploitation targeting her own family members. We believe this case should proceed to trial. My mother's attorney rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is, at its core, a family misunderstanding that has been tragically blown out of proportion. Mrs. Collins was managing family finances in what she believed was the best interest of all family members. While some of her methods may have been unorthodox, there was no criminal intent. I felt Jake stiffen beside me at the audacity of this characterization. The judge, an older man with penetrating eyes, seemed similarly unimpressed. Unorthodox methods? He repeated. Counsel, the evidence shows forged signatures on credit applications and unauthorized transfers from designated accounts. Are you suggesting that's standard family financial management? The attorney backpedaled slightly. Your Honor, family finances are often handled informally, with implied consent between spouses. And what about the accounts opened in her daughter's name without her knowledge? The judge interrupted. Was that also with implied consent? The legal battle continued in this vein, with my mother's attorney attempting to paint her actions as well-intentioned if misguided, while DHN systematically dismantled each argument with documented evidence. When the judge ruled that the case would proceed to trial, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My mother finally turned and looked at me then, her expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. I met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. After a moment, she turned away. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the unusual nature of the case. My father, who had testified briefly during the hearing, was surrounded by microphones and cameras. Mr. Collins, did you have any knowledge of your wife's financial activities? A reporter called out. My father looked exhausted but resolute. I trusted my wife implicitly for 30 years. That trust was misplaced, and I bear responsibility for not being more vigilant. But no, I had no knowledge of the extent of her deception until recently. Another reporter pushed forward. Samantha, how does it feel to be pursuing criminal charges against your own mother? Before I could respond, Jake stepped slightly in front of me. My wife is not pursuing this case for personal gratification. This is about accountability for serious financial crimes that have affected multiple victims. We'd appreciate privacy during this difficult time. As we tried to make our way to the car, Amber unexpectedly appeared, pushing through the reporters to reach us. She had been staying with friends since the confrontation, trying to process everything that had happened. I want to make a statement, she announced, her voice shaking slightly but determined. The reporters immediately clustered around her, sensing a new angle to the story. My name is Amber Collins. I'm the younger daughter of Eleanor Collins, and I fully support the charges against my mother. For years, she manipulated me, used me as a pawn against my sister, and exploited my trust. I'll be testifying for the prosecution, and I encourage anyone else who has been victimized by her to come forward. The reporters erupted with questions, but Jake managed to usher both Amber and me into his car. As we drove away, Amber burst into tears. I was so scared, she admitted between sobs. But I couldn't let her think I was still under her control. I reached back from the front seat to squeeze her hand. You were incredibly brave. Thank you. In the following weeks, the case became more complex. As Eleanor's attorney proposed a plea deal, she would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a suspended sentence and financial restitution. It's not enough, I insisted during a meeting with DHN. She needs to acknowledge what she did, all of it, not just the parts that can be easily proven. The district attorney nodded thoughtfully. I understand your position, and I share your concerns about the adequacy of the proposed deal. However, trials are unpredictable, and juries sometimes struggle with cases where the victims are family members. We eventually agreed to a modified plea arrangement that required full financial restitution, community service, and mandatory therapy, along with a suspended sentence that would become active if any terms were violated. It wasn't perfect justice, but it provided a path forward without a lengthy, public trial that would further traumatize our family. The day of the plea hearing, the courtroom was packed with spectators and media. My mother sat rigidly at the defense table, her expression unreadable as the charges were read aloud. When asked how she pleaded, she hesitated for a long moment before saying, "Guilty," in a voice barely above a whisper. The judge asked if she wished to make a statement before sentencing. Eleanor stood slowly, adjusting her jacket with hands that trembled slightly. I maintain that my actions were taken for the benefit of my family, she began, her voice stronger now. But I recognize that I crossed legal boundaries and hurt the people I was meant to protect. I accept responsibility for my actions and will comply with the court's requirements. It wasn't a true apology. There was no acknowledgement of the emotional damage she'd caused, no genuine remorse, but it was as close as Eleanor Collins would likely ever come to admitting wrongdoing. When it was my turn to make a victim impact statement, I approached the podium with a written speech that suddenly seemed inadequate. Looking at my mother's impassive face, I set the paper aside. For most of my life, I believed I was somehow lacking. Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not worthy enough of my mother's love and attention. I worked harder, achieved more, asked for less, all trying to earn approval that never came. Today, I understand that nothing would have ever been enough, because the problem was never with me. My voice grew stronger as I continued. Financial abuse leaves invisible scars. The money can eventually be repaid, but the trust that's broken, the sense of security that's shattered, those take much longer to heal. My mother taught me that I couldn't count on the person who was supposed to protect me above all others. That's a lesson no child should ever learn. I looked directly at Eleanor then. I don't hate you, Mom. I pity you. Because in pursuing money and control, you lost the one thing of real value, the love of your family. No offshore account can replace that. As I returned to my seat, the courtroom was silent. My father wiped tears from his eyes. Amber reached for my hand and squeezed it tightly. Even my mother seemed affected. A flicker of something, regret perhaps, or simple recognition, crossing her face before her customary mask returned. The judge delivered the sentence according to the plea agreement, adding his own stern admonishment about the particular betrayal involved in financial crimes against family members. As the proceedings concluded, I felt a profound sense of closure. The legal battle wasn't a perfect resolution. Nothing could truly make up for decades of manipulation and betrayal, but it was an acknowledgement of the truth, a public reckoning that validated our experiences. Outside the courthouse, away from the cameras and reporters, Jake pulled me into a tight embrace. "You were magnificent in there," he whispered against my hair. "I'm so proud of you." For the first time since our wedding day, I felt truly free, not just from my mother's control, but from the self-doubt and insecurity she had instilled in me. The legal battle had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Some wounds need to be opened before they can properly heal. As we drove away from the courthouse, Amber asked from the back seat, "What happens now?" It was a question we were all grappling with. What does a family do after something like this? How do we rebuild from such a fundamental betrayal? "Now," I said after a thoughtful pause, "we get to decide what kind of family we want to be. Not the one Mom created with lies, but something real, something honest." Jake glanced at me with a smile before returning his eyes to the road. "And we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Looking out the window at the passing city, I realized that while the legal battle was ending, our journey of healing was just beginning. But for the first time, I felt hopeful about where that journey might lead. Have you ever had to confront someone who deeply betrayed your trust? It takes incredible strength to stand up for yourself when it's family doing the hurting. Our story of healing is just beginning, but I'm learning that real family, whether by blood or by choice, is built on honesty and unconditional support. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button to follow our journey forward. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step toward healing. Thank you for being here with me today. The months following the court case were a time of rebuilding, not just relationships, but our very understanding of what family meant. Jake and I finally moved into our new home, a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb that felt worlds away from the upper middle-class neighborhood where I'd grown up. We made a deliberate decision to create clear boundaries with both families, insisting on healthy interactions and open communication. My father, Richard, was undergoing his own transformation. After 30 years of deferring to my mother, he was learning to assert himself and make independent decisions. He sold the family home, too big for one person and filled with painful memories, and moved into a downtown apartment. He started cooking classes, joined a hiking club, and even began dating again, tentatively exploring a relationship with a kind-hearted librarian he met at a community event. "I don't know who I am without your mother," he admitted during one of our weekly dinners at our house. "For so long, my identity was wrapped up in being Eleanor's husband, your father, the family accountant. Now I have to figure out who Richard Collins really is." Jake's parents, William and Patricia Henderson, continued to be pillars of support, but they were careful not to overstep. Patricia had taken my father under her wing in a gentle, friendly way, inviting him to family gatherings and making sure he wasn't alone during holidays. William had become something of a mentor to Amber, helping her navigate her return to graduate school and offering career advice. Amber's journey was perhaps the most dramatic of all. From the entitled golden child who expected everything to be handed to her, she had transformed into a determined young woman, confronting her own complicity in our family's dysfunction. "I was her weapon against you," she told me during one of our newly established sister brunches, "and I let it happen because I liked being the favorite. I'm so sorry, Sam." "You were a child," I reminded her. "We both were. Mom manipulated us both, just in different ways." Amber had returned to graduate school, this time studying psychology with a focus on family systems. She'd moved into an apartment with roommates, refusing financial help from our father or the Hendersons, insistent on making her own way. "I need to know I can do this on my own," she explained. "I've never stood on my own 2 feet before." She had also started dating a kind, stable medical student named Ryan, a far cry from the flashy, superficial men she'd been drawn to in the past. Watching her grow into her authentic self was one of the unexpected joys of this difficult time. My relationship with Jake had deepened through the ordeal. He had seen me at my most vulnerable and stood firmly by my side, never wavering in his support. "You're the strongest person I know," he told me one night as we lay in bed. "To go through what you did and still have such capacity for love and forgiveness, it's remarkable." I wasn't sure about the forgiveness part yet. My feelings toward my mother were complicated. Anger, hurt, disappointment, and occasionally, in unguarded moments, flashes of the love I'd always craved from her. I was working through these emotions in therapy sessions, a process both painful and liberating. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me understand that my mother likely suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, though she had never been formally diagnosed. "People with NPD often create elaborate facades," she explained. "They're incapable of seeing others as separate beings with their own needs and rights. To your mother, you and your sister were extensions of herself, possessions rather than individuals." Understanding the psychology behind my mother's behavior didn't excuse it, but it helped me process my experiences and begin to heal. I started to recognize the subtle ways her manipulation had shaped my self-perception and relationships, and worked to unlearn these patterns. One unexpected source of healing came through connecting with other victims of family financial abuse. Through a support group recommended by Dr. Martinez, I met others with similar stories: adult children whose parents had stolen their identities, spouses who discovered secret debts, siblings defrauded by those they trusted most. Sharing our experiences and recovery strategies created a powerful sense of community and validation. This led Jake and me to establish a small foundation dedicated to raising awareness about family financial abuse and providing resources for victims. We called it Clear Accounts, offering educational workshops, connections to legal aid, and support groups. What had begun as my personal nightmare was transforming into a mission to help others. While we were rebuilding our lives, my mother was complying with the terms of her plea agreement, at least technically. She performed her community service at a women's shelter, attended mandatory therapy sessions, and made the required restitution payments. But there was never any indication of genuine remorse or understanding of the damage she had caused. She had moved in with her sister in a neighboring state, maintaining minimal contact with anyone from her previous life. Occasionally, she would send formal, impersonal emails to my father regarding practical matters related to their divorce. She never contacted me or Amber directly. Through the grapevine of family connections, we heard that she was crafting a narrative of herself as the victim, a loving mother and wife whose family had turned against her over financial misunderstandings. Some distant relatives and former friends believed her version of events, creating painful divisions in our extended family network. 6 months after the court case, Jake and I received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was an antique silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother, one of the family heirlooms my mother had sold years ago. A note from my father explained, "Found this at an estate sale 3 towns over. The dealer remembered buying it from your mother. I've been trying to track down as many family pieces as possible. Thought you should have this one." Holding the locket in my hand, feeling its familiar weight and intricate engravings, I was overcome with emotion. This tangible piece of family history represented something my mother had never understood, that some things have value beyond their monetary worth. The locket connected me to my grandmother, whom I barely remembered, but who had loved me enough to set aside money for my education. During this period of healing and reconstruction, Jake and I had been discussing starting our own family. The prospect of becoming a mother myself brought up complex feelings: fear that I might unknowingly replicate toxic patterns, determination to create a different kind of family environment, hope for a new generation untainted by the past. "You're not your mother," Jake reminded me whenever these anxieties surfaced. "You're conscious of these patterns, which means you can choose different ones." Dr. Martinez helped me work through these fears as well. "The fact that you're concerned about this shows you're already taking a different path," she assured me. Narcissistic parents don't worry about the impact of their behavior on their children. Slowly, tentatively, I began to envision a different kind of family legacy, one built on honesty, respect, and genuine love, rather than appearances and control. The most unexpected development in our family reconstruction came one rainy Tuesday afternoon when Amber called, her voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. "I found letters," she said without preamble, "from Grandma to you, dozens of them, dating from when you were born until just before she died. Mom hid them." My heart raced as Amber explained. She'd been helping Dad clear out the last of his belongings from a storage unit when they discovered a locked box. Inside were letters addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting, birthday cards with uncashed checks, and even a journal she had kept about her hopes for her granddaughters. "She loved you so much, Sam," Amber said, her voice breaking. "The letters are beautiful. She was so proud of you, even when you were just a little girl. She saw you, really saw you." That evening, sitting at our kitchen table with the box of letters before me, I felt as if I was meeting my grandmother for the first time. Her words were warm, insightful, often funny, describing my mother's childhood with clear-eyed affection, but also noting concerning tendencies. She had seen in Eleanor the patterns that would later define my own childhood. In one of the final letters, written just months before her death, my grandmother had written, "My dearest Samantha, I worry that your mother's need for control may come between you two as you grow older. Remember that you are your own person, with your own light to shine in this world. Never let anyone dim that light, not even your mother, especially not your mother." Reading those words, written 15 years earlier but somehow exactly what I needed to hear now, brought both tears and a profound sense of being understood across time. My grandmother had recognized the dynamics at play and tried, in her way, to protect me. That my mother had hidden these letters only confirmed how threatened she had felt by that protection. With each passing month, our new family configuration stabilized and strengthened. Holiday traditions were reimagined. Thanksgiving at the Hendersons' home, with my father and Amber included as honored guests. Christmas Eve at our house, with everyone contributing to the meal and celebration. We created new rituals and inside jokes, building memories untainted by manipulation or hidden agendas. There were still difficult moments, of course. The first anniversary of our wedding brought back painful memories of my mother's public betrayal. Certain songs or scents would unexpectedly trigger childhood memories, both good and bad. Family gatherings sometimes held an awareness of absence, the empty space where Eleanor should have been. But increasingly, these moments became less frequent, less intense. We were creating a new normal, one founded on authentic relationships rather than appearances. The Collins Henderson extended family was messy, imperfect, and still healing. But it was real, in a way my childhood family had never been. As spring arrived, bringing fresh growth and renewal, Jake and I received the news we'd been hoping for. We were expecting our first child. The timing felt symbolic, a new life representing our faith in the future, despite the pain of the past. This child will never doubt they are loved for exactly who they are, I vowed as Jake, and I shared our news with our reconstructed family over dinner. They will know their worth isn't tied to performance or appearance or usefulness. Around the table, faces shining with genuine joy, our family raised glasses in celebration, not just of the coming baby, but of everything we had survived and rebuilt together. In that moment, I understood that while my mother had taken many things from me over the years, she had inadvertently given me a precious gift as well: the knowledge of what family should not be, which had enabled me to recognize and create what family could and should be. The car that had triggered everything sat in our driveway, now simply a means of transportation rather than a symbol of betrayal. Jake had suggested selling it and buying something else, but I had decided to keep it as a reminder of how far we'd come. Sometimes the most painful beginnings lead to the most beautiful journeys. 1 year after the day that should have been the happiest of my life, but instead unleashed a family tsunami, Jake and I stood in a different courtroom for a very different purpose. Eleanor Collins, my mother, was being sentenced after violating the terms of her plea agreement. Despite the court's orders, she had attempted to open new credit accounts using my father's information, while continuing to present herself as a victim of family persecution. The judge, the same stern-faced man who had presided over her original case, showed little patience for her explanations. "Mrs. Collins, you were given an opportunity to make amends and demonstrate change. Instead, you have shown a pattern of continued deception. This court has no choice but to impose the suspended sentence." As my mother was led away to begin serving her 18-month prison term, I felt no triumph, only a complex mixture of sadness and relief. The woman who had given me life but withheld unconditional love would spend the next year and a half in a minimum security facility, finally facing consequences she couldn't manipulate her way out of. Outside the courthouse, reporters again clustered around us, hungry for comments on this latest development in what had become a locally infamous case. This time, I decided to speak. Financial abuse within families leaves invisible scars that take years to heal, I said, looking directly into the cameras. If my family's story helps even one person recognize and escape a similar situation, then some good will have come from our pain. I hope my mother finds peace and healing during her time in prison. In the car afterward, Jake squeezed my hand. That was incredibly gracious, considering everything she's done. I rested my other hand on my now visible pregnancy bump. I'm not holding on to anger anymore, not for her sake, but for mine, for our babies. The prison sentence created a strange sense of closure. With Eleanor physically removed from our lives for a defined period, we could fully focus on healing and moving forward. My father finalized his divorce, legally ending a 30-year marriage that had become a shell of manipulation and control. Amber completed her first year of graduate studies with excellent grades, growing more confident and independent by the day. Jake and I threw ourselves into preparations for our baby, transforming one of our bedrooms into a nursery filled with books, stuffed animals, and a hand-painted mural of a forest scene that Jake spent weekends creating. William and Patricia Henderson were ecstatic about becoming grandparents, showering us with gifts while respectfully following our wishes regarding how we wanted to raise our child. "No designer baby clothes," I had specified with a laugh. "Nothing that can't go in the washing machine." Patricia had nodded understandingly. "Practical love is the best kind," she'd said, presenting us instead with a college savings account she and William had established for their future grandchild, properly structured with ironclad legal protections, a pointed contrast to my own stolen college fund. As my due date approached, I felt an increasing desire for some kind of resolution with my mother, despite everything. After discussing it with my therapist and Jake, I decided to visit Eleanor in prison, not for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. The visit was nothing like the dramatic prison scenes from movies. We sat across from each other at a small table in a room with several other inmates and visitors, under the watchful eyes of corrections officers. Eleanor looked older, her carefully maintained appearance simplified by prison regulations. No designer clothes, minimal makeup, hair pulled back simply. "You're pregnant," she said when I sat down, her eyes fixing on my rounded belly. 7 months, I confirmed. A girl. A complicated expression crossed her face. Longing, regret, calculation. I would have liked to know I was going to be a grandmother. "Would you?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have seen her as another person to manipulate and control?" Eleanor flinched slightly. "That's not fair, Samantha, isn't it? You stole my education fund, my identity, and tried to take my wedding gift. You showed no genuine remorse, and then committed fraud again while on probation. Why would I expose my daughter to that?" She had no answer, her gaze dropping to the table between us. "I didn't come here to argue," I continued. "I came because I need to say something, and then I need to move on with my life." I took a deep breath. "I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I'm breaking the cycle of manipulation and control that you perpetuated, and I will raise my daughter to know her worth isn't tied to performance or appearance or usefulness." Eleanor's eyes glistened with what might have been tears, but her expression remained guarded. "So, this is goodbye then?" "This is me closing a chapter," I clarified. "What happens next is entirely up to you. If you ever genuinely want to make amends, real amends, not just words, that door might be open. But my priority will always be protecting my family from harmful influences." I stood to leave, one hand resting on my belly. "I hope you find whatever it is you've been looking for, Mom. I really do." As I walked away, I heard her call after me, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it before. "Samantha, I do love you. In my way." I paused but didn't turn around. I know. That's the tragedy of it all. 2 months later, our daughter Eliza Grace Henderson was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect new life, unencumbered by the past, yet carrying forward the best parts of our family's legacies. Her middle name honored Jake's grandmother, a woman of remarkable strength and kindness. We deliberately chose not to incorporate any version of Eleanor into her name, a small but significant boundary. On Eliza's first birthday, we hosted a celebration in our backyard. The weather was perfect, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze stirring the balloons tied to the fence. Our reconstructed family gathered around. My father with his new partner Barbara, Amber and Ryan, now engaged. The Hendersons, beaming with grandparental pride, friends who had supported us through the darkest times. Even Aunt Carolyn, who had become a beloved presence in our lives. As Jake carried out the small cake with a single candle, I looked around at the circle of faces, all genuinely happy, all there because they wanted to be, not because of obligation or appearance. This was what family should be. Imperfect people loving each other without conditions or agendas. My father pulled me aside during the festivities, handing me a small wrapped package. "I found another one," he said. Inside was my grandmother's cameo brooch, another recovered family heirloom. He had made it his mission to track down as many as possible, working with antique dealers and online marketplaces to reclaim pieces of our heritage. "She would be so proud of you," he said, nodding toward Eliza, who was happily smashing cake in her high chair. Of all of this, the foundation Jake and I had started, Clear Accounts, was thriving. What began as a small support group had expanded to include legal advocacy, financial literacy, education, and public awareness campaigns about family financial abuse. I had found purpose in helping others recognize and escape situations similar to my own, turning my pain into something constructive. One unexpected outcome of our public story was the creation of new legislation in our state addressing financial abuse within families. The Collins-Henderson Act strengthened protections for victims, and increased penalties for perpetrators. When the governor signed it into law, Jake and I were invited to attend the ceremony, a surreal but deeply meaningful recognition that our family trauma might help prevent others from suffering similarly. As for my mother, she served her full sentence without further incident. Upon release, she moved to Florida, where she had apparently established connections during her Cayman Islands banking activities. She occasionally sent formal birthday and Christmas cards to Eliza, which we acknowledged with equally formal thank you notes, but nothing more. The door remained theoretically open for genuine reconciliation, but Eleanor showed no signs of walking through it. Amber, in an act of remarkable courage, had chosen to study family financial abuse for her graduate thesis, incorporating our family's story along with others she had encountered through clear accounts. "If I can use what happened to us to help others, it gives meaning to all that pain," she explained. Her professor had encouraged her to expand the research into a book, which she was now working on with passionate dedication. The car that had been the catalyst for unraveling our family secrets remained in our driveway, now serving as our practical family vehicle. Jake had suggested replacing it multiple times, but I had developed a strange affection for it, this inanimate object that had accidentally exposed decades of lies. "It reminds me to trust my instincts," I explained when friends asked why we kept it. "And that sometimes what looks like a disaster is actually the beginning of something better." On the anniversary of our wedding, Jake and I decided to reclaim the date with a vow renewal ceremony, small, intimate, and completely authentic. In the garden of the Hendersons' home, surrounded only by those who truly loved us, we promised again to stand by each other through whatever life might bring. "1 year ago, we thought we were ending a journey," Jake said, his voice steady as he held my hands in his. "Instead, we were just beginning one. Thank you for walking it with me, even through the darkest parts." I looked into his eyes, thinking of all we had weathered together. When I said for better or worse, I had no idea how quickly we'd be testing the worst part, I replied with a smile. "But we made it through. And now we get to build something real together. A family based on love and truth, not appearances and control." As we sealed our renewed vows with a kiss, our daughter squealed happily from my father's arms, as if offering her own approval. In that perfect moment, I felt the final pieces click into place. The painful journey that began at our wedding reception had led us here, to authentic relationships, to purposeful work, to a family redefined by choice rather than blood. The car that started it all sat in the driveway, now just a car, the key to nowhere in particular, but also to everywhere we might choose to go, together. What a journey this past year has been. From the darkest moment at my wedding to this new chapter filled with genuine love and purpose. I never could have imagined that my mother's shocking announcement about our car would lead to uncovering decades of family secrets, but it ultimately led us to rebuild something far more authentic and beautiful. If my story has touched you in any way, please subscribe to follow our continuing journey with baby Eliza and our work helping other families heal from financial abuse. Your comments mean the world to me. Have you ever found that what seemed like your worst moment actually became the catalyst for positive change? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and renewal in the comments below. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing that family trauma doesn't have to define your future, please share this video. Thank you for being part of our extended family of support through screens. Sometimes the family we choose is just as important as the one we're born into.